Greetings, greetings, greetings. MooDog from MooDog's Frugal RCs and more in the research kitchen today, doing a how-to video, guys. Today, we're going to be showing you how to convert your 18650 powered RC truck into Lipo power. Real easy to do. It's going to take some soldering. It's going to take some wire cutting. I'm going to show you how to get it done. Also, I'd like to give Steve-O D from the 313 a shout out today. Got the sticker in the mail. Steve, thanks a lot. I appreciate you sending this out to me. Hey, guys, I am in the process right now of trying to get some stickers printed up for my channel and to get those distributed out there. If anybody knows of a hookup for some good deals on some good quality stickers, put it down in the comments section below. I really appreciate it. Thanks to everybody for subscribing. Let's get to this mod right now. All right, guys, let's get right into this. Now, what is the reason for doing an upgrade? I call this an upgrade. I want to get more speed, more punch off the line with this vehicle. The 18650 lithium ion cell batteries are good. They charge kind of slow. That's kind of an Achilles heel to this battery. Also, the punch or the discharge rate on these is a little bit slower than a standard 25C or so discharge rate on a Lipo. Now, Lipo chemistry batteries are a little bit more fidgety. They're a little bit more dangerous if you don't care for them properly. So there are some kind of give and takes when you're doing this type of upgrade. But we'll get into that either later in this video or in a separate video going forward. So what we're going to be doing, guys, is eliminating these. Now, there's two ways we can do this upgrade. We can actually do it so we can still use these as well as a Lipo battery. And that can get kind of messy as far as the aesthetics of it. It just doesn't look good, but you can do it. I'm going to opt out of using these 18650s on this vehicle and just go with straight Lipos. The type of Lipos that we're going to be using are that have the Dean's connector end on them, and they are a 2S Lipo. So we're looking at having a balance port, charging port here, as well as the Dean's connector for the actual power on here. In preparation for doing this modification, we're going to have to cut some wires. We're going to have to do some soldering. So if you guys aren't familiar with soldering at all, I would recommend going on YouTube and looking up soldering. There's some soldering instruction videos, I'm sure, somewhere up on YouTube. So what we're going to be doing today, guys, is we're going to be routing a connector, a male Dean's or T-style connector to the actual ESC. And to do that, we're going to have to cut these zip ties here and then fish those wires out that we need to cut. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is go ahead and cut these zip ties off of here. And sorry, my camera's kind of going out of focus here. Let's zoom out just a little bit here. We're going to cut these zip ties here. Now, when you're doing this, guys, make sure that you're taking your time and you're not clipping wires in the process because you don't want to clip something wrong. Just take your time and cut with the very tip of the your side cutter or whatever you're using. But go ahead and just clip those out of the way, pull those free. Now we're going to go ahead and disconnect this connector right here. This is actually the connection from the ESC to the motor here, I believe. And we're going to have to go ahead. Hang on a second. Maybe it's not. No, this is the one we have to cut. So I don't know what they did here, but it looks as though they have a little coupling on here as well. I'm not quite sure what that's all about. I'm not going to take it apart to find out, though. So what we have to do is disconnect this right here, guys. Just basically just pull it apart. There we go. Yeah, you just have to give it a little juice. And if you tear something out of here, it's not that big a deal. Again, we're going to be disabling these battery connectors inside of here. I'm actually going to go ahead and pull out the metal tangs that are in here that are soldered, and we'll do that a little bit later in the video. But the wire that we're looking to get to, guys, is going to be this one right here, and it's the one that's leading directly down to the ESC. Instead of powering the ESC via the batteries that would sit on these little side saddles panels here. We're going to power it using the 2S Lipo with the Dean's connector. So we can actually cut this existing wire back a little bit further because I do have some wire ends on here. What we want to do, guys, is cut these back, strip them back, twist them together, solder them together, heat shrink them back up, and then zip tie this all neatly out in front here. We'll get to that when the time comes. But the first thing we're going to do, guys, right now is go ahead and cut these wires off, and we can cut them both at the same time or cut one individually, however we wanted to do that. Next thing we're going to do is prep these wires, and in order to do that, we're going to have a stripper, and I have one over here. Now, any kind of stripper will work fine, but I use this multi-gauge wire stripper here. These you can get pretty cheap. I think I got this one at Harbor Freight for about $5 or something. It's pretty inexpensive. So this is easy to get if you don't have one already. If you don't have this type of stripper, you can use a knife or something like that, or even a side cutter that's got a good sharp blade on it. You would just very gently cut through the coating part of it and then strip the wire back that way. This is silicone coated wire, so this coating on here is very, very soft, so you want to make sure that you're being careful when you're stripping it and not taking any wire strands with you. This is 14 gauge wire here, guys, so I'll go ahead and zoom this in just a little bit so you guys can see what's going on here. And there's a little 14 on this stripper here. We're going to put it in that saddle, close it down over the wire, and then go ahead and strip these wires back. I think something like about a ½ inch of exposed wire on here will be just enough, or perfect, in fact. So we'll go ahead and get that stripped down. Next thing we're going to do, guys, is get some shrink tube and go ahead and put some shrink tubing, just kind of loop it over the wire and let it sit there towards the end closest to the ESC, so the heat conducted from soldering doesn't actually shrink it. What I'm going to be using for heat shrink tubing today, guys, is this out of this kit that I got from Harbor Freight. Now, I'm not necessarily pimping Harbor Freight, but you can get stuff on the cheap there if you know what you're looking for that works just as good as the high ticket item. This is a 127 piece kit that I've kind of ravaged already, but we're going to go ahead and choose our heat shrink tube out of there, cut it to length if we need to, and then go ahead and apply it to our wire. Now I've got just a couple of pieces of this left, the correct size, so we're going to go a little bit bigger than you would normally think on something like this, only because we want to make sure that it's not going to prematurely shrink once we apply the heat from our solder gun. That transfers that heat down this wire really quickly, and it can actually heat that coating of the wire, the silicone up on this wire, enough to shrink the tubing on there in the wrong spot. So what we want to do is make sure we have a big enough piece, and we're going to go ahead and slide that on real quick here. So I'll just use the scissors to do this part right here, and I'm going to go ahead and cut this probably right in half here. I think that'll be fine. And we're going to use half on one wire and half on the other. We can set those down there for now. And then prepping the other end of the wire is going to be the same way, guys. 14 gauge wire. So we're going to go ahead and strip that about the same length as we have the wire coming off the ESC on the car. So about a ½ inch, I think I'll be fine with this. So once we have it to that point, I'll take a little bit more up of here, I think. Just a touch more. And there we go. All right, guys, now that we've got both of our wires stripped back and ready for actual attachment to the plug end, we are going to go ahead and put some shrink tubing on here, and we're going to get that set all the way down towards the ESC to prevent heat transfer from the actual soldering iron. We don't want that to prematurely shrink these tubes here and then cause us an issue. So we'll go ahead and slide those all the way back, and we're going to go ahead and take our prepped wire. This is our actual wire that we're going to be using here with the connector already on it. And as mentioned, if I haven't mentioned already, a lot of times you'll end up using just this plug and have to solder onto this plug. But because I've got this already pre-made from another vehicle, I'm going to go ahead and use it as it is and just go ahead and solder these wires together. And I think the easiest way to do this, guys, would be cutting probably a little bit more of this back than I already had here. So I'm probably going to take another maybe 1.25 inches or so of length off of these, just so I'm not dealing with too much wire. And I'll go ahead and just cut those off and strip these back real quick here. And these are 14 gauge, so we can go ahead and hit the 14 slot there and then pull that coating off. Right around 1/2 inch or so, maybe close to 1 inch, somewhere in that neighborhood. Should be plenty of wire strip on there. And we're going to go one at a time with these guys. I've already got my soldering iron heating up right now. I'm using lead-free solder. This is a solid core solder, no flux core. That stuff can be kind of toxic, so you want to make sure if you're using a lead-based solder that you have plenty of ventilation. If possible, wear a respirator. I recommend it. I use lead-free solder and lead-free paste flux for all of my soldering around the shop area here. So everything that's done here is pretty much done as safely and as effectively and frugally as I possibly can do it. So you see how I'm tying these together, just kind of reverse. I'll actually do that again so you guys can see. I'll straighten these back out real quick here, and I'll show you how I'm tying these together. You may have your own. There's no right or wrong way to do this. This is the way I've been doing it for years. So I'm kind of making a cross, almost butting the two ends of the insulation on the wire together, and just kind of spinning it around one another in this sort of fashion here, just kind of rolling it up. That way you have less mass of twisted wire in the center, and it kind of mimics the width of the wire with the coating on, and it's a lot easier for me anyway to go ahead and roll this shrink tubing up on there. So with that done there, guys, we're going to go ahead and get this fluxed, and we'll go ahead and get that soldered up. All right, as mentioned before, guys, I am using lead-free tending flux. Now, you can use whatever flux you want to. I like to go with the less toxic stuff, and this stuff seems to be pretty non-toxic. This does cause some irritation to skin, so you don't want to be, rubbing it on your hands or whatever. So just use some caution while you're doing this. You can wear gloves if you choose to. Now, I'll just take the end of the cut-off piece of wire I have and use this as kind of a brush. So I'll get a little bit of solder flux on there and go ahead and just brush it on that joint here, the two twisted together wires that I want to solder together. And we'll go ahead and just put that on there. You don't have no specific amount. You can glob it on there if you want to. It really doesn't matter too much how much you put on, but you want to get some on there to let that solder kind of run or flow a little bit better. So go ahead and get our soldering gun here, making sure that our tip is cleaned. All right, with that tip good and cleaned off, guys, or at least somewhat cleaned off, we'll go ahead and do that one more time. From time to time, guys, you're going to want to probably take a little bit of light sandpaper and just clean this tip off so you get the shiniest surface you possibly can. That's going to conduct the most amount of heat. So go ahead and pick up a little solder on our soldering iron here, and we'll go ahead and just touch it on our wires here, and you can probably hear the sizzle and see the smoke coming up in front of the screen there. That is a good sign. We want to hear that sizzle. That's letting us know that that solder is flowing nicely, and we have a good hot soldering tip here. So that's basically what we want to see now, guys. If you take a look at that, and I'll zoom that in a little bit. Hopefully this camera will focus for me. There we go, and we can see that solder joint right there has got a shine to it, guys. That's what you want to see when you're doing this. You want to make sure that you got a nice shiny solder joint, and that's going to let you know that that solder flowed and we got good adhesion or good connection, I guess you could say. So that's what you want to see when you're doing this. Let's go ahead and get that next one done then. All right, same way on this one, guys. We're going to go ahead and get our flux real quick here. A little bit of flux on the end of our makeshift brush here, and just kind of brush this on the two wires that we're going to be soldering together to get that solder flowing good and hot and give us a good connection. We've already got our shrink tube on the wire closest to the ESC there to prevent the heat transfer from the solder. And now we can go ahead and get this thing soldered up. I'm going to wipe my tip off here on my sponge just a little bit, and we'll go ahead and pick up some solder on here, guys. And like so, just a little BB sized ball, something like that. And then go ahead and being careful not to burn or melt anything around us. We'll go ahead and touch that on our wires, and we could add a little bit more solder to that, let it heat up, and that looks like another winner right there. All right, we'll let that cool off for just a second, guys. I'm going to go ahead and test this. You always want to test your connection to make sure your connection is going to be good, that you have good hot solder joints before you put your shrink tube on. Otherwise, you got to undo everything, and it's just kind of a pain in the butt. All right, before I connect this battery to the car here, I'm going to go ahead and just slide this. Now that this is cooled off enough and there's no worry of it prematurely shrinking on there, I'm going to go ahead and slide these up into place just to kind of insulate that. I want to make sure that I'm not touching these two together when that battery's connected. Otherwise, we could short the battery out or possibly harm or destroy our ESC. So we'll go ahead and zoom back out. And I apologize for the camera acting funky there, guys. Let's go ahead and plug this guy in carefully. Now, Dean's are pretty much, you can kind of figure out how to do that. We'll go ahead and plug that battery in. And we'll go ahead and hit the power button, or hit the power switch on the side here, and we should see LEDs in the front. And we do. You can kind of see those back here. I'll roll it back just a little bit, and we can see that we definitely have LEDs. And on the top of the ESC, we should see a flashing red light, and you can see it right by the antenna, right next to my thumb there. It looks like we have power. So that's all we need to be able to see. We've already determined that our solder joints look good. We do have a connection right now. We can go ahead and get that shrink tube heated up and in place and start tying these wires down. All right, now you want to make sure that the shrink tube that you have is going to be covering equally. In other words, you want to get that solder joint that you just made in the center of the shrink tube. So center it on there good to make sure you got that whole thing covered. And I usually will use a heat gun that I have, but if you don't have a heat gun, this is the next best thing, just your standard Bic lighter. You go ahead and just heat that up with the lighter, making sure to keep that flame moving back and forth, spin the wire around, and you want to look for something like that as an end result. So I can get that to focus for you guys real quick here. There we go. So something like that is what you want to see for an end result. You don't want to go too long with the heat in one spot on that. You can actually burn it or burn the adjacent coating on the wire itself. So do the same thing with the other side here. Again, moving that flame back and forth, making sure that we're not overdoing it in any one spot. That's pretty much it. That's what we want to see as an end result. Next thing we're going to do, guys, is go ahead and route these wires, and we're going to take some zip ties, some small zip ties, and then zip tie them along behind probably the ESC, and then these wires are going to come on the other side. So let me get this other stuff out of the way here, and we'll start routing this wire. All right, guys, knowing that I'm not going to be keeping this connection here, I went ahead and I removed our plug from that end, and I discarded it, but I'll show you. I cut it off at this junction right here. And I'm just going to go ahead and take another piece of larger size shrink tubing and cover that up and kind of insulate that. At a later date, once I take this thing apart for service, I will probably end up removing these wires completely, but I'm going to go ahead and take a piece of shrink tube now and cut that down to about such and such a length here, and we'll go ahead and cover this up. And the same way we did it with the smaller wires, we can do it with this as well. And this is really not that necessary. There's going to be no power going to it. I just like to keep a cleaner look going when I'm doing this type of work. So next thing I'm going to do is take the wires that we've soldered together. Here's the wires coming from the ESC that we're going to route. What I'm going to do is I'm going to route them behind the heatsink. You want to keep them off of the heatsink of this ESC because it does get hot at times. It has potential to get hot, and you don't want to be burning anything up. Now I'm going to go ahead and take some zip ties. Just the smaller ones like this work pretty good, and those can be had pretty much anywhere. I got mine again at Harbor Freight. Very inexpensive, but pretty much the same as anybody else's. Now I'm taking a small pick here, and I'm going under the wires for the servo right here that are actually tied in under these clips, and I'm kind of giving them a little tug up, making a loop on both of these sides right here, both of these areas here, and that's going to give me areas to actually zip tie the power wires to. So I'll go ahead and run these behind the heatsink here, not getting near that heatsink. I can take up some of the slack towards the back here, just kind of pull it backward a little bit, and we'll go ahead and get one zip tie in. Sometimes you have to bend these tips down a little bit to get them to feed right. There we go. Oh, almost. Let's try that again. All right, a lot easier off camera, but that's okay. And pull that back a little bit again. Now you kind of want to set this where you want it. So I'm going to give this a little bit of a loop, like so. And I want my wires to come out right about here. So when I've got my battery, and I'll show you where I'm going to be putting my battery on this one. And it all depends, battery placement on these cars when you're doing these types of modifications is all going to depend on how big your chassis is, what kind of space you have on your chassis. Those are the things we're going to have to look for. Because there isn't a whole lot of space to mount a battery underneath here anywhere, I'm going to have to use a strategic spot for it, and I'll show you that in a second. But so we're going to want to kind of measure the length of this, and you can kind of pull a little bit back if the wire's longer than what you need, and making sure that you're not touching anywhere on the body of the on the can of the motor. This is called the can here, the silver part. You want to keep the wires kind of away from that if you can, and then we'll do the same on this side. I'm going to bend the tip on here a little bit so it's easier to feed through, and we'll feed that through that little loop that we made out of the servo wire, and we'll go ahead and just zip that down. Now we're not going to completely tighten this just yet. So I'm going to leave that one a little loose so we can make sure that we're where we want to be with this, and I think that's going to give us a pretty good spot there. And this one is zipped down pretty good. We can go ahead and tighten this one down as well. And this one I want to land probably right about here. So I'm going to take one more zip tie, and I'm going to use this spot right here on the frame. It's kind of a whole opening right there. I guess you guys can see that or not. But I'm going to use that spot right there to make my last point of contact, or my point of, you know what I mean. I'm going to put my last zip tie right there. You can pull that farther back. You want to have a little bit of a loop there so there's some movement, and that should do it. Now I'll go ahead and we'll just cut these zip ties off here. Like so. And we can take this wire that we've, the wires from the battery connection to the ESC, and kind of tuck them in the back, and we'll take the wire that we cut off. This is the original wires, and we'll just kind of stuff it down firmly but gently behind the motor, between the motor and the ESC, and that's pretty much it. Now you can take your pick and go through and kind of give these wires a little bit of a loop here so you're not having a lot of stress pulling on them. Being careful not to, obviously this is a sharp tool here, you don't want to put any holes or cause any reasons for these to short out. That's pretty much it. I could do a little bit more cleaning up on here, but I think that's going to be a good spot for our wiring. Now, batteries we talked about before. We're going to be using the 2S 1300 to 1500. I've got a couple of 1500s like this as well that I may be using. Now, mounting these batteries, you could put it like this. How we're going to be doing this on this car, guys, As you can see, we've got our body mount right here, the actual body mount here, the rack area. I guess I call it kind of a rack. We're going to go ahead and put the battery between in the opening right there. You can see it fits quite nicely. And then I can run my battery, my wires down this way. And you want to make sure when you're connecting these that you're not interfering with the servo at all. Let's see. There we go. That you're not interfering with the servo, and you want to make sure that you can get the hood or the body attached without any problems. So you don't want this wire here to be sticking up too high and causing that body not to be able to fit over these pins. So that's kind of what we're looking at here, guys, for how it's going to connect. And then in this case, I would use a strap. I would take my strap like so, and you can go around the whole shoot and match wire and all if you want, making sure not to pull too tight on it. And then just go ahead and Velcro this puppy in. And that's it. So essentially what you've done is you've converted your vehicle from using these 18650 lithium ion cells to using Lipos. And that's it. You're going to get more punch, more zip out of these batteries, just a more efficient power transfer, I think, and just a faster car all around. But that's pretty much it for this video, guys. I hope you learned something by this. This was not a how-to solder video. If you do this and you void the warranty of your vehicle, it's on you. It's not on me. I'm doing this for entertainment and instructional purpose, so that's pretty much it. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. If you don't, give it a thumbs down. Let me know what you guys think about videos like this in the future. Thanks for stopping by, guys. We'll see you all in the next one, and God bless the Republic.